Hello. I'm here to talk to you today about the I Ching and the nature of reality and what this says about rules for living. I think a lot of people that are drawn to something like the I Ching or most sort of spiritual systems are trying to look in some way for a system, a formula that will be kind of their general rule that they can then apply to everything to solve all their problems or to live successfully in some sort of sense. And the I Ching in some ways might seem to kind of encourage that, right? Because it seems at first glance like the I Ching reduces all of reality to this kind of binary of, yin and yang. You've got the solid and broken lines there, and there's the 64 hexagrams, so it looks like a nice, really ordered way of looking at the world, and that if you can just figure out that order, if you can figure out that secret code that the I Ching has, it's going to give you the answer of how to just be able to always to know the secret formula you apply that will fix everything all at once, right? But of course, reality isn't like that, and neither is the I Ching. People who think it's like that are applying it incorrectly, and it's probably got a lot to do with the way that they already live their lives. So the first thing to accept is that there is no real specific method of approaching individual situations that will apply to every specific individual situation. There's no way to say, well, if A happens, then do B every time, right? Treating reality as if that there's always a consistent, predictable formula that you can apply to every situation is doomed to failure because it's an oversimplification. You can't have a consistent success that way. There are some kind of, let's call this formula an ideology, right? There are some ideologies that, when applied in a general scale, can end up succeeding more often than not, right? Or succeeding for a while, or succeeding in a way, usually because of the application of force in some way, that you're trying to force reality to fit the ideology rather than the other way around. And this meets with a certain amount of temporary success. But history is full of failed ideologies that try to follow that one formula to solve everything mentality. And I mean even earliest history. If you look at the ancient myths, you see all these stories of individual heroes. The Greek myths, they're all suffering from hubris, right? Which is to think themselves the equals of the gods. Which is to say, basically, thinking that you figured it all out, that you figured out the secret word, the secret formula, that is one size fits all, right? In the Jewish Kabbalah, there is this idea that there is this secret word, which is the word of God, the tetragrammaton, and that no one knows how to pronounce the word, so therefore it can never be applied. But that if someone ever did learn how to pronounce it, that would be the end of the world, because the world would fall apart, right? In other legends and myths, you consistently see these stories about great heroes capable of doing great things, because if you have a good formula, you might be able to do some really great things for a while, right? But these heroes inevitably are taken down in the classic legends and the classic myths because they couldn't change their ways. You see this in the Mahabharata with Karna, who is a great and powerful hero, one of the mightiest warriors, but he has all these kind of complexes about what he believed to be his ancestry, and then even when he gets the things that he thought he wanted, he can't change that nature of that kind of envy that leads him to his own doom in the end. Right? In Western mythology, in the Arthurian saga, you have the story of King Pellinore and the questing beast. And King Pellinore there's this monster that he becomes obsessed with chasing, and he chases it all over the realms, to the neglect of his kingdom, to the neglect of everything. And even his involvement in chasing the questing beast has effects that contribute to the struggle between him and King Lot, and to his sons and the sons of Lot, and then eventually that contributes to the war that brings down Camelot, and everything falls apart because of that notion, that quest. And then in the later version of the Arthurian cycle, the questing beast appears again with Sir Palomides the Saracen, who he is in love with Isolde, who's of course she's in love with Tristan, so he can never have her. And because of this woman that he could never have, this quest for this woman that he could never have, he goes on this other quest to hunt down the questing beast, which he can also never catch, because that's the nature of a questing beast. You can never actually catch it. So he pursues it all over the place, and suffers terrible suffering because of it, just like he was suffering terrible suffering because he insisted in his mind that he wanted Isolde and he couldn't have her. And the interesting thing in that version of the story is that Palomides is a Saracen. He's a heathen in the context of the culture that made the story. And then later on, he converts. He becomes a Christian. And then when he becomes a Christian, he is able to finally slay the questing beast. And so this can be understood in a symbolic sense, as that suddenly he's looked beyond that flat plane of what is immediate, and he has looked towards the vertical plane, to heaven, and he's found that thing that he was not, that he thought he was looking for and wasn't able to attain. And with that, he was then very easily able to defeat all the things that he thought were a source of a problem for him. So what all this is getting to is that you have people taken down by their own consistency. A lot of spiritual seekers want that. They want a consistent rule, a consistent formula that will let them be able to resolve all what they see as a chaotic world. And that's certainly understandable. But if you're the type of person that tries to develop this kind of consistent formula and apply that formula, inevitably you distance yourself from what's actually real. Now, what is it that the I Ching actually tells us about this? Well, what it says is, what you have to learn isn't one method that applies to all situations, because that doesn't exist. What you do see with the I Ching is there's these 64 hexagrams that represent these kind of 64 broad concepts. And then within them, there are 6 lines, and each of those lines can change or not change. And so those can create a whole variety of possibilities. And you can then proceed to look deeper and deeper into those to find even more possibilities. But the central point of it is that each hexagram represents a moment in time. But it's always in the process of changing, and it's never changing in exactly the same way. It's changing into something different, and then that something different changes into something different. So the one consistent thing that is real is change. And in that change, you can find not a consistent method that lets you address each situation, but you can find certain forces that allow you to learn how to see what needs to be done in a given situation. So the I Ching is not about learning one method that applies to everything. It's about learning the way to understand which method should be applied at which time. If you can understand what the situation is, what's going on at this time, then you can learn how to apply the right solution for this time, which is going to be different than the right solution at a different time. So in the I Ching, each hexagram brings with it advice to the superior individual, to the higher self. It's not the same advice in every hexagram. In fact, every hexagram has different advice. So it's saying even in at the level of the higher self, it's not just that if you obtain a certain level of spiritual development or enlightenment or what you want to call it, that you'll then be able to resolve every situation by acting the same way, by acting super spiritual or something like that. Instead, what it says is that a superior individual, his ability is to understand the context of time and space and this moment, and therefore know how to apply yourself to that moment. There's a different advice to superior individual in each circumstance represented by each of the hexagrams of the I Ching. And so the I Ching is a guide to know how to act in different given situations. But you can only know how to act because there are core forces, founding concepts that apply to all situations. These core forces aren't a formula. They're things you have to develop, you have to cultivate within yourself. In the Yifa society, we call this virtue. It's from the Chinese de, which is virtue and also power. This is the power that lets you act on each situation. And they're represented in they're laid down, you could say, in the very first hexagram of the I Ching, in the hexagram called creation. The very first descriptive line of the I Ching, Yuan Heng Li Jun, is sublime celestial forces in motion. So you have virtue is understanding those sublime celestial forces in motion and being able to apply yourself through them to doing the correct thing in every given situation. These virtues can be defined as union or love, discipline, balance or harmony, and truth, which is to say the ability to understand reality and to be in it. And these constitute virtue. And you can then use that virtue as a power that you apply in different situations, which by your cultivation, by engaging in a spiritual practice, you've also developed ways in awareness of sensing what the particular and unique response is that is called for in every particular and unique situation. Acting the same in different situations is not a realistic perspective. You have to not know, it's not about knowing if A happens then I have to act like B. It's about knowing how can I understand the complexities of what is happening at this moment in space and time, and then apply my virtue to trying to do the best thing in that moment, in that situation. You can't find fulfillment or really succeed in life going through it with just one formula of what to do, because sooner or later that will clash with reality. And if in the end you choose your consistency, your inability to change in the face of the changing reality, you're going to fail. Any such ideology is going to fail, whether it's individual or whether it's an ideology that is applied by a collective, right? You can succeed if you learn the underlying mechanics of reality, so that then you can know how to create the right formula for the right specific moment. So that's everything today. If you like this video, check out the other videos in the Yifa playlist and in this channel. And feel free to subscribe and to share these videos so that other people can hear about them. And if you're looking for a process of spiritual cultivation to be able to develop those qualities in yourself and engage in self-transformation, in developing the superior individual, then feel free to get in touch if you think you'd be interested in the curriculum of the Yi Fa Society. Thank you.